Behind every great result, there's a story of innovation and collaboration.
There's a lot more collaboration between our customer and us, and it's because we can share data.
Our Proficy software customers aren't just clients, they're partners in progress. For more than 20 years, we've worked with you to accelerate the digital revolution and drive real results within your industrial operations.
The software takes production data and used to make sure that machines, operators, and managers are able to make the right decisions at the right time.
Proficy isn't just a tool, it's the engine driving your success forward, and the solution enabling your enterprise to decrease costs, increase profits, reduce waste, improve efficiency, and much more.
The data's in the Proficy system.
But it's not just about the numbers, it's about the people. Together, we empower teams, accelerate innovation, and drive toward a future that's brighter, more sustainable, and more profitable than ever before. We invite you to experience the power of smart and sustainable operations with Proficy from GE Vernova.
Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Ben Latham, and I'm the Director of the Solution Provider Program in EMEA. I'm based in the UK. I'd like to welcome you all to the session today. Great to have you. Today's session, Windows 10 Obsolescence. Are you ready? So today's event is part of our System Integrator educational series. The events are called Tech Talk, and they're all intended to raise the awareness and knowledge of new products, enhancements, technology trends, but all with the goal to help our solution provider community improve productivity, solve customer challenges, and ultimately uncover new revenue opportunities. Now, today, as you might know, Microsoft will end support for Windows 10 on October the 14th this year. And this development presents a significant challenge for many organizations that we talk to, especially those that rely on SCADA systems. Now, as a system integrator, your expertise will be invaluable to your customers. And today we'll aim to give you and provide you with some knowledge and tools that you might need to navigate this upcoming transition smoothly and explore the potential impacts so that you can ensure a seamless upgrade and ongoing success for you and your customers. Usual safe harbor slide here during the session, just in case we do discuss any future roadmap enhancements that are not committed right now, but you can always check with us, and any questions you have around anything we say, just reach out. Finally, some housekeeping. I'll just go over this now. You've got a few of these buttons on your screen that you should see. The orange chat bubble, you can submit questions throughout the session. We'll aim to get to them at the end or follow up via email, but please use that. Let's get the questions in there and we can answer them. The purple email icon, you can contact myself for more information on the Solution Provider Program. There's the blue paperclip icon where you can access lots of different additional resources like access to the training site, product information, and other ways to hear updates from us. There's a question mark button where you can get technical assistance, and I'll just give a little tip here that if you just try refreshing your browser, it does tend to fix most issues that people have. And then there's the feedback survey through the pink clipboard icon. We'd really love to hear everyone's feedback on this session, on previous sessions, on what you'd like to hear and just what you're experiencing with your customers. We really value that. And finally, I'll just remind everyone that this session is recorded. So the slides will be sent out via email, so please look out for that, and you'll be able to reference back to those materials as you need. Finally, from me, until we get back to the question and answer session at the end, or I'll come back to moderate that, just to introduce Alec as our subject matter expert. He's got a wealth of experience and knowledge on today's topic. because he's the project manager for iFIX, which is part of our automation HMI SCADA product set. Now, Alec's been with GE Vernova for many years in a variety of roles, and I'm sure he's excited to share more about the developments in this area today. So with that, we can get started, and I'll let Alec take it away.
Thanks, Ben, for the introduction, and thank you all for joining. Really do appreciate your time today. So, we have a good amount of information to go over. By all means, as Ben said, just please enter your questions in so that we can make sure that we address them during the session if we can. So, again, thank you. Without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started and just walk you through some of these things. So, obviously, I'm pretty sure at this point, everybody pretty much knows that October of this year, we will see that Microsoft is stopping their support of Windows 10, right? It's really an obsolescence. So obviously this is, a cause of concern and also something that generates us going through the process of planning on how we mitigate that concern. So, we have some of the elements there. We're moving to a new OS or doing whatever we're doing. There's a lack of appropriate hardware sometimes that, may cause an issue when it comes to upgrading. We see historically in the past, especially with SCADA customers, like a slow uptake in things. And I think with the market and the world the way it is really today, where you have hackers and other people who are, really focused on malicious attacks, especially on certain particular targets. I think that we are seeing a move industry-wide, not even just within automation, where, various different companies and various different suppliers, especially when it comes into areas of concern or areas where they're providing a service that is very important to the public, that everyone is moving towards a path and a pattern, a plan where they can get updates more quickly and keep themselves move themselves into a place where they have a less risk there for attack from various vectors, right? So that's something obviously that we wanted to address this session here. So obviously we're talking to you as system integrators, and so maybe your application itself may be not at risk, but ask yourself the question when it comes to your customer base, are they at risk? If you are looking at the install base and the projects that you have completed over the years, are those customers staying up to date, or as Ben had mentioned there earlier, are they really just relying on your expertise, which is great. If they are relying on your expertise, then I think it makes the most sense, obviously, for you guys to come in here, not only understanding what end of life means from a Microsoft perspective in relation to Windows 10, but also preparing them for how they can do risk mitigation. So obviously with Microsoft and their end of life for Windows 10, it's going to be no more technical support, right? There's going to be, in terms of security updates, you're not going to see that either, right? So Microsoft's going to spend literally zero time doing any patching or updating for Windows 10 based operating systems, right? You're going to also see that new features, functionality that they're coming out with beyond just the security piece of it there's also going to see a stop to that. So obviously with this, your operating system being at the heart of what is done here, and typically in many of our installations, that can propose or pose a major risk there for customers, right? So you have the issues where there maybe possibly when they're doing updates to certain pieces of software from us or others in many other areas, from us not so much of a concern, but from that perspective. But there are many providers out there who simply refuse to do any updates on older operating systems. Obviously, even from our perspective, we also have life cycles, right? So you're going to run into life cycle risks from various different vendors or your customers. So helping them to stay apprised of the newest operating system and also the newest capabilities, especially obviously mitigating the attack vector, is very important, right? So we think that as the obsolescence continues forward and you move farther and farther away from support, especially the security updates, that's going to be leaving customers at greater and greater risk, right? So day one risk probably pretty low, but coming forward, months later, you're going to be in a tougher spot as, the hackers find that this is a soft target, right? So really, typically speaking, they want to go after, installations that are going to cause the most damage or give the most leverage, and also, of course, being the softer target, which would be something that's outside of support. So really, you're looking at, decreasing that risk itself is really what you're trying to do for the customers. But, I think it's even beyond that, right? It's looking at what are ways that you can kind of optimize things and upgrade things, not just a simple, hey, let's upgrade your OS and we're out the door. I think there's ways that you guys can lend your expertise to the situation here and help poise your customer base for greater success in the future, right? So you're looking at things like outdated system architectures. From a hardware perspective, is there a way that we can optimize it? Are they using, thick clients only? Maybe they can move to thin clients. Maybe there's something when it comes to unsupported software or obsolete hardware, when it comes to looking at their architecture as a whole and saying, hey, is there a way that we can better poise you for updates and upgrades, staying up to abreast of all the newest features, functionality going forward? Are there ways that we can help to make this process less intrusive, in the future? So that's really what we want to spend a few moments here talking about, is the upgrade opportunities, right? So when you're looking at it, as I mentioned kind of earlier there, but the thin client architecture, right? If you're looking at how things are done today as maybe versus how they were done when things were first implemented, you've got web space. So people can access from more devices and access from a web-based layer, right? So you can view and control what's going on in your SCADA system remotely, right? This seems to be a major benefit, especially as workforces have more flexibility there in whether they are physically collated together like they used to be all the time, and now it seems to be spread out over geographical distances. Looking at terminal services, where, like I mentioned there earlier, where you can have an architecture that lends more quickly to updates, where you have hosted services, right? Where it's basically a remote desktop in, right? So you have those kind of capabilities there. Operations Hub, Operations Hub having the capabilities to allow for a persona-based visual experience. Typical visuals that were created, years and years ago, which many of our, like for instance, iFIX customers are operating on screens that were 10, 15 years old in terms of development. Things are not necessarily done the same way anymore. And also the way that information is offered up in terms of visuals and data on the screen. Does everybody need to see everything? Or is there a way that people who can have different roles within their organization can get more persona-based visual experiences, offering up more efficient information exchange for them so they can make more efficient decisions in real time? Those are the kind of things that can be thought about during this process. So you can really kind of come in with an entire plan. Virtualization, we're seeing a lot of customers where they're hosting their SCADA on VMs, right? So are you helping to isolate that OS from the hardware, again, reducing, hardware costs, allowing for possibilities of faster updates, right? Where you can spin up a new VM and load things onto that, and then you can help them migrate their application over, right? So allowing for a lower downtime versus just doing directly on node upgrades, things like that that are ways to think about how you go forward with this architecture. The cloud, utilizing the cloud. We have, for instance, Historian hosted in cloud applications, right? So you can that is a possibility. Sometimes when you first did your implementation, it might be at a certain specific site A, for instance, at a specific customer. They may have more sites now. Are they looking at ways that they can maybe consolidate their historical data, their alarms, the information that's generated, and you're looking at, well, if you can consolidate, your analytical capabilities can also be of more value because there's more information that can be leveraged there during the analytical process. So maybe that's something that they want to look at as well too, even from a simple thing as around the security and taking away those attack vectors, looking at things like Proficy authentication, where you can unify your architecture with this central management theme, and which we'll go into a little bit more. But with you, when you're building out your architecture here and you employ a central management themology throughout everything, you can say, okay, well, I'll do security from one area where it can leverage and stretch out to the rest of the application, even across sites. If your customers are utilizing their intranet in terms of communication between them, then that there's something like that where you can have single sign-on capabilities. You can have multi-factor authentication. You can leverage Active Directory through LDAP. Those kind of things that can be done there to help customers stay more up to date on their authentication, their security implementations. So it's not so much a manual process going forward, and you can take advantage of higher and higher authentication capabilities by leveraging Active Directory. So that may be something that many customers aren't even aware of right now. Those are things that as you're going through this process and having the conversations with your customer base that you want to keep in mind. Obviously another thing too is the actual user experience itself, right? So I mentioned there earlier about information, right? The typical HMI screen of yesteryear is kind of a one size fits all. Let's give you all the information right there. And then you're training individual users where to look or what to do in terms of getting access to the things that are relevant for them. If you can take a step back and you can look at the various roles that are needed within the organization of your customer, if they have people who, like I said, mentioned that multi-site approach, they have people who are looking across sites, maybe they can find a better, more efficient role where, or visual where they can sign in with their credentials to this, one security with Proficy authentication. It can recognize based on the credentials that this person's role is viewing and interacting with multiple sites. They may only need to see some KPIs around the site. They may need to see a, display where you drop in a Google Map card, for instance, and they can click on the individual sites, and you can have a static type of gauge display that can show them relevant information per site. That can be done today. It wasn't able to be done before, so leveraging web-based, HTML5-based display capabilities, allowing for, again, that flexibility within the customer base and within their own security implementations, that are customer specific, that makes sense for them, right? So there's a lot of things that can be done in terms of that, the actual user experience itself that, you might want to obviously take a look at when you're coming into relation to bringing things forward. Another area that I briefly touched on earlier was the analytics piece, right? These customers have been recording data for sometimes decades. That is a gold mine, right? So there's some level of analysis that obviously is pretty readily apparent for the average user to do pretty easily based off of historical data, but we can leverage AI ML, AI and machine learning, and bring that analytics capability to the next level, right? Where you're looking at sometimes what would be disparate information sources. You can now collate them, you can bring them together, and they can feed into the same repository. And now you can find correlations that may or may not have been readily apparent. One of those, for instance, is leveraging Proficy C-Sense, obviously within our portfolio, and in 2024, iFIX, for example, there is an alarm pattern recognition card based off of CSense. And this is essentially what you get is CSense Essentials included in iFIX 2024. You can use that alarm pattern recognition card that for free comes with the software, implement that, and it can look at the historical data, doing analysis continuously, and look and see, okay, alarm A comes, and typically speaking, looking at the history, once alarm A is triggered, alarms E and F come in relation to them, typically within 6 or 7 hours or something like that. People may have figured that out before, may have not, because depending again on how information was brought in before, it will, you'll have deeper understanding. So that alarm pattern recognition, as I mentioned, it is continuously checking on these things. So you'll have a greater understanding of what's going on. And again, correlation doesn't necessarily equal causation, but it's always a good area for investigation. So when it comes to this, leveraging the functionality and capabilities that are part of the Proficy portfolio and helping your customers, again, poising them for greater success in the future is something I think would be wise, especially from your role as the expert coming in there and helping them with this upgrade during this obsolescence period. So, looking at next year in terms of the future, I would say that one of the things that we recommend is that you schedule regular risk assessments, reviews with customers. Maybe it's once a year, maybe it's once every 2 years, and you'll have to kind of find a cadence that's relevant and works well with your customer schedule. But it really just depends on the business, the industry, what they're working at with their applications that they have available. But really, I would say that your approach will help to further solidify your view as a expert and as a champion there, not only for getting them up to date with their OS, but also for making sure that they are taking the best advantage of the features and functionalities available for them. I can't tell you how many customer meetings I've gone into, and I just tell them, what we've developed in the last 5 or 6 years, and they're, completely blown away because they had no idea, right? So I think if you all are scheduling these kind of reviews, one, you can avoid any kind of risks due to obsolescence and issues there, but also, again, poising them for success both now and in the future. So, obviously, how we can help, we've actually created a lot of documentation around, vulnerability, Windows 10 risk assessment. We have obviously documentation that's hosted online for architectural guidance. We have lots of things as secure deployment guides to help with that implementation. A lot of things that are available there for customers under acceleration plans that, again, helping them to keep up to date. The AP itself, they can get access to all the latest versions of the software if they're just under AP. So I would say that, leveraging that as part of the risk assessment that you all are doing with your customers would also be of benefit too as well. And then, looking at some of the actual benefits and features and capabilities, just so you all are up to date as well on yourself. But, obviously from the perspective, I think walking them through these 5 main reasons to upgrade is probably a great use of your time together, where you're talking about the obsolescence piece. Obviously, that's the reason for even this meeting. And, understanding that, Windows 10 is not the only thing that's going to go obsolete. So, helping them to avoid that obsolescence and keeping them up to date with, various life cycles of the components that they use, outside of even of what we do. But, from benefiting from HMI SCADA, of course, you can get the new functionality. I mentioned a couple of high level ones there earlier, but, the idea is you can also modernize the application. Again, I don't know how many customers I have gone to, spoken to, visited their sites where, their visualization was done 10, 15 plus years ago. Not saying that that's terrible, but, in terms of efficiency, there are better ways to do things. There are better ways to, to offer up information, more efficient pathways that from a user experience perspective, they can get better response times to certain issues that are going on, alarming, those kind of things. And, they leverage, advanced analytics that are part of the Proficy portfolio. Again, with 2024, you have access to, the basics from Proficy CSIMs. Leverage that, where you can take advantage of those kind of things, PID loop optimization, those kind of things that are standard functionality within our portfolio now, and ultimately enhancing the security of their systems. I've seen a lot of customers, unfortunately, where username passwords are sometimes on sticky notes. Not a great implementation there, but are there ways that you can enhance that security? Are there ways that you can tie more things together where you're simplifying the architecture for them? You're looking at ways that you can get information that may have been stuffed off in a random repository and bring that into their HMI SCADA experience, evolving that SCADA experience. So allowing and leveraging our CSIMS analytics part of our suite to move SCADA from just a supervisory role to an advisory role, where they can really tell them about, possible future maintenance and looking at other things that they may need to do to make sure that their processes are running as efficiently as possible. This slide here is a development timeline for iFIX over the last 20 years. Don't worry, I'm not going to read it all to you. The point of what this slide really is just to show is that we have been doing a lot of development over the years. We've been implementing a lot of key functionality. And so, your customers in many cases are not aware of all of these, right? Especially in the later years. And so, talk to customers about the central management theme, leveraging the configuration hub utility within the Proficy portfolio that was first introduced in 6.5 and continues to be brought forward, where you're looking at how do you tie your architecture together? How do you do things like, say, concurrent development? That's possible in a configuration hub leverage model, right? You can even things, the modeling itself, object orientation. Are they building assets there within the model-based approach in central management that, maybe around specific types of equipment, like a pump or, something like a conveyor or something along those lines, where they can bring their equipment, new equipment online, and they can do it and create a new instance of that really quickly. And that as a template, it creates the entire tag structure and alarming structure and all that stuff like that for them, just with a new instance. You guys can save time as well too when it comes to the implementation. Things like that are important when it comes to updates itself. Leveraging the central management and taking advantage of being able to pass files back and forth. We implemented the ability for being able to take a project in iFIX and full project configuration capability in Config Hub. You could actually send the projects from one node to another. So if you update something as simple as a picture on one node, you can send that to all the others, through Configuration Hub. So you don't have to remote desktop in or, physically get up and relocate yourself to another machine. Anything that's available in that architecture could be referenced and, reached through the process. In terms of the impact, this slide here is more relevant here for you all when you're coming in having the conversations with your customer. We put this together to talk about the impact of changes. Like we see, typically speaking, I haven't seen a lot recently of prior to 5.8. I know a few 5.5s, but 5.8 to 2024, and just kind of helping customers understand, what possible impacts it will be. So really the core capability one and the base technology layer there, those rows, those are the ones that you need to focus your attention on. Like there might be something in relation to, like we talked about earlier, hardware issues relating to Visual Studio 2019, right? That might be a problem for them. Maybe not, but those are things. That's something that, at least from base technology, that might be of relevance there for them. The big thing with 6.0 prior to 6.0 to 6.0 and beyond is the long tag names, right? So if you're looking at 6.0, you have to talk about upgrading your clients and then your SCADA, right? So looking at those kind of things where, you know, they may be of some importance in how you do things. But other than that, it's really just talking about new capabilities that could be of importance to them, and obviously supported OS. And, you know, not all of our customers are on iFIX, of course. So Simplicity, we have a very similar slide layout here as well too, just kind of going over some of the major changes to alarming and functionality there, bringing in central management themes as well too, and leveraging configuration hub as well in the Simplicity model. And they had, you know, also prepared a similar operating system support compatibility matrix as well as the same thing that we had there. So you can obviously reference this online. This is not only the only ways it can be done, but if you're looking at your support site or looking on our documentation under, you know, the requirements for the system, we'll have they'll have a similar list here in terms of the OS compatibility. So really, when it comes to assessing the current system with the customers, you're really looking at, okay, obviously, because of the Windows 10 piece of the puzzle, you're looking at operating system. Are they running currently today? You know, if it's Windows 10, they're, you know, they can, you know, maybe use for an HMI client. Is that Windows 10 also on the SCADA server, which obviously would be of, you know, a more at more risk, excuse me, than the client itself. But, you know, what is the version of iFIX and Simplicity that they're currently running? You know, are they taking advantage of the new capabilities, or are they on really old versions of the software, which also has implications to the security as well too, because we've added a lot of our own security patches and functionality there as well too to harden our systems there as well. And if they're on very old versions, obviously they're out of our support lifecycle as well too. So those are things that maybe that you want to have in terms of that conversation with the customers. The historian, what version of historian are they having installed right now in their application? You know, if they're looking at the system itself, was it built with a different goal in mind than they need today? You know, those are kind of things that we can look at in looking at the drivers, the communication, the software, the security, all those things that can play into the risk assessment. So just these are kind of some few things to keep in mind as you're having that conversation. You know, looking at the next steps, and you're looking at the Windows 11 implementation. Does their current hardware have the RAM and other elements that are necessary to run properly, right? They might be on some very old software and very old hardware, excuse me. So looking at that, you know, is it possible that this is also time for them to upgrade the hardware? You know, are they running everything completely on node, directly installed, or are they looking at VMs? You know, those are kind of things that you wanted to assess there in terms of the hardware and the software. You know, are there compatibility issues when it comes to Windows 11? So there are certain things like trusted platform module and the like that may be of importance when you're updating to Windows 11 that, you know, they may not currently have access to or have support for with their hardware that is there today. So that's something that while you're having that conversation, you want to look at and have in terms of the next steps. We have created a document here, an upgrade guide for iFIX as well too, that kind of walks you through that path for the upgrade workflow. You know, talking about when you should do what. This is a document available on our documentation sites, and obviously you guys have access to it here. And you know, it's part of you all being part of our network of SI. So, you know, we just wanted to bring that to your attention that this does exist already. If you didn't already have access to it or didn't already know that it was part of available documentation for you. So I wanted to show you that this is a possibility as well too. Other things from a upgrade perspective that we wanted to highlight. we have had the backup and restore utility in iFIX for a number of years. It's been a long time, very long time, but its implementation in the past wasn't as flexible as it is today, right? And so what we had in the past, you could create a backup file on a specific version of iFIX and on the specific node, but it was only relevant to that implementation. So if you had a 5.5 or 6.1 backup, it would be relevant even down to the specific version of SIM that was installed on that node. You could only restore it back to exactly the same configuration. So there had some benefit there, but it wasn't as good as it is today. What we did in 2023 iFIX is we actually updated the backup and restore utility. You can create a backup file on any really old version of iFIX. And we've tested all the way back to 5.5. There are no indications that earlier versions of iFIX would have a problem. But yeah, we tested all the way back to 5.5, where you can take a 5.5 backup and restore file. You can create the backup file there with this utility. You can do, we recommend you do a full backup. You can see the radio button there for custom or full. Recommend you do a full backup file to create that. And then on 2023 or 2024, you can take that old backup file and restore it to a fresh node. So if you're employing the virtual machine architecture, if you put a new VM and spin up a new VM with fresh new 2023 or fresh new 2024, 2024 is what we actually recommend. If you're doing it today, you can actually take that old backup file and restore it directly to that new node. So that's part of the things that we've added to help with the upgrade process. Another thing that we've added too is the Proficy installer. And both of these technologies, both the backup restore utility enhancement and the Proficy installer, was done as a foundational update, so that ultimately in the configuration hub architecture, which you'll see on the last slide, we can do these things centrally. So that's the vision for where we have these, but we had to build the technology first to do this. But Proficy installer can understand what's available on your node, even if it's a VM, obviously. Can understand what's already installed on that node. It can understand what you're trying to do. You have various different selection, radio buttons, and you can see there whatever versions of SCADA or IGS or whatever you're trying to install. You can deselect things that you don't want to update or select things that you do, and it will do one install session. It'll install everything all in the correct order. It does all the registry key stuff that we had of yesteryear, does that all in the background. You don't have to touch any of that. You're talking about 15 minutes to do a full install of that SCADA standalone server, for instance, which would be historian collectors, adding your historian server to that as well too, productivity tools, all those things of that can be done in 12 to 15 minutes on one node. And again, it will upgrade what's available there. So you leverage the backup restore utility plus the Proficy installer. It should be a much faster process for you all in terms of upgrading the nodes at your customer facilities. So same thing with that we had for iFIX. We had a checklist as well too for simplicity. Their upgrade sequence, they always do the viewers first, SCADA second. So that's kind of the typical thing. We had to implement that too as well with the pre 6.0 to after 6.0 iFIX, where we always recommend viewers first, SCADA second. Simplicity does the same thing. So you can back up their logging databases, your projects, your system files as well too. You can uninstall the previous version, reinstall new versions. Those are capabilities that you have. And again, the Proficy installer can be leveraged to make that process much easier and faster. So why upgrade, right? Obviously, we've talked about some of the actual capabilities that we've added, but really the heart of it is why, right? The central management, I think, is a big deal for your customer base as well as you. So you're looking at this and saying, okay, we can have a web-based project configuration, web-based node management. We have license management, central license management through Configuration Hub. You have the modeling capability through Configuration Hub. Proficy authentication is leveraged again through Configuration Hub. So you can have that single sign-on and multi-factor authentication throughout the entire customer architecture as well, because you can unify it together. When we talk about the things like the backup restore capabilities and talk about Proficy Installer coming into the central management journey, poising your customers for success there also is of great importance. We have new scripting capabilities through that as well too. You can leverage, HTML5 based clients through Operations Hub, all through the one utility. Operations Hub screens are designed in Configuration Hub Central Management. So we are moving everything into this web-based approach. So you spend less time on your side to as well learning the ins and outs of very specific software implementations. You can learn everything from a central management or configuration hub perspective, and you can spend your time there versus jumping in between softwares, right? Then, configuration hub, nothing really runs there. It gets pushed down to the relevant nodes as the nodes become engines offering up the capability and also taking down any configuration and management that you guys have set up there as well too centrally. But yeah, things like historical screen playback, analytics, those kind of tools, all done and set up through configuration. So you'll see some abilities that are there that aren't necessarily there, especially like the modeling approach. They're in the individual softwares by themselves. Yeah, so just some of the summary of key technology and capability updates from an iFIX perspective. We have added TCP/IP-based redundancy, which is we'll talk about a little bit more on the next slide. OPC UA server client added additional capability. You've seen those earlier in the presentation. The central management piece of it, obviously more alarm shelving capabilities, suppression capabilities, enhanced alarm distribution and performance that was done in 2023 and 2024. And then we have, machine learning based alarm intelligence. I talked to you guys earlier about CIMPLICITY and how it can do things where like alarm pattern recognition as well too, to be leveraged there for more efficient understanding of processes and more efficient processes, period, once they do the analysis of what's going on. You have multi-factor authentication. I mentioned there with Proficy authentication, you can do Active Directory and support it through LDAP. Looking at enhanced failover itself, we had everything prior to 2023 was based off of a UDP approach in iFIX. Enhanced failovers, it worked, but obviously UDP doesn't have packet retransmit or packet loss detection, right? So you don't have that as a base technology. So you had to do these things like jumbo frames and put the two nodes side by side, each other, dedicated cable between the two of them. That worked well for when it was first implemented, but it wasn't necessarily what people were looking for. We got feedback as we focused a lot of our attention on the voice of customer, and we got feedback that a lot of customers wanted to do some level of geographic separation capabilities, or possibly even have a failover to a cloud-based VM. Obviously cannot be done with the UDP-based technology, so we added TCP as well. So what TCP itself, great, packet loss detection, packet retransmit, but it's a little bit heavier weight, right? So we actually added packet compression there to allow for decreased time to synchronize the two databases. Did testing between our Foxborough, Schenectady locations, it's almost 200 miles difference between the two places. We were just leveraging publicly available internet architecture. It's not like we were running a dedicated cable 185 miles between the two locations, but we were able to synchronize a 65,000 tag database between those two locations in about 3 seconds. And that's all the test data shows that we're sub 3 seconds. So that's kind of where we just want to show that is possible today with the TCP-based architecture. And from a user perspective, or when you're going to the customers, if you're upgrading their implementation of enhanced failover, the UDP radio button would be selected because it's just an upgrade, but you can move over to TCP. So iFIX 2023, 2024 have this packet compression on by default. You can go into an INI file if you want to turn it off. I don't see why anyone would, but that is possible. But yeah, no more jumbo frames. We still recommend that you have a, NIC card dedicated for communication, synchronization, but Other than that, it's a very simple process. And any new future enhanced failover implementations have TCP on by default. So I mentioned a little bit about performance and scalability, alarm generation distribution performance. This was something that we did in the base 2024. And this was a look at how do we be more efficient with our networking, right? When the first alarms were set up there, it had a packet size of 16K. Made sense back then, but hadn't really been looked at in a long time. And you could fit about 3 to 4 alarms in a packet. Today's architectures are more complex. The implementations are doing a lot more with less, which is great. So we said, okay, how do we be more efficient? We leveraged the packet compression idea that we had brought in 2023 for our synchronization for enhanced failover, leveraged that compression to 2024 and said, how about we compress our alarms? And so we increased the network packet size from 16K to 64, and we compressed the alarms. So now instead of 3 to 4 alarms in a packet, we fit 3 to 400. It's a huge increase in how many alarms can be accepted through the system. We also refactored how it's sent to the client, so that itself is way faster than it had been before. We increased the network throughput, and that has positive benefits whether or not people are in an alarm scenario or alarm flood scenario. So there's benefits period to the system just in reducing that traffic. So we were seeing in our own labs about an 80% reduction in alarm generation distribution time, which is cool and during alarm flood scenarios. But what was nice, a very nice surprise, was when customers actually implemented they're in their own actual real implementations, they were seeing 12 to 18x improvement. It's a huge leap forward in terms of efficiency in networking and communication for alarm generation distribution. So we also did some workspace startup time improvements. So, we, with all the additional capabilities that we've gone and moving between OSs, we noticed that there had been a little bit of a slowdown in workspace startup. So we wanted to really focus on that, and we did that too as well, especially in run mode. So web-space terminal services have some of the best results with this. Of course, it applies to everything, but we had roughly about an 80% improvement there in our testing. So, and from what we have seen from customers implemented in 2024, they're getting very similar results, if not better. So the alarm generation distribution performance, workspace startup time improvements are all major importance there as well. We also did something with iFIX 2024, which came in a SIM, it's already out today, which was picture open performance update, right? So through all you guys' feedback and other feedback from our distributors and customers, they had identified that iFIX 5.5 had been the fastest that iFIX had ever been when it came to picture open performance. So we set that as the benchmark. Then we actually took several real customer projects, real customer use cases, real projects internally. Thankfully, they were willing to lend that for our development efforts and testing, and they themselves ultimately taking that up as well too in beta. But we were aiming for improving over even iFIX 5.5, and we were able to, in each of these customer projects, real use cases, see major updates and major improvements in the picture open performance with this SIM. So we were aiming, sub 1 second, make sure everything was going fast as well too, significant improvement over the previous versions of iFIX. And we set this at the bottom of the screen. You'll see the sample system there test. That is the iFIX version. You'll see the 5.5 up top there. That 2025 thing is really the SIM General 002. But the point of this slide here is to show sample system, which everybody's pretty familiar with. You can see pretty easily, how it is performing. So you can see that iFIX 5.5 was set there as the benchmark. You have the chemical, discrete, pharma, and water pictures. You can see that with the new SIM, you're roughly 30+% faster. So really decreasing a third of the time it took to do picture open performance. And that's exactly what we're seeing, and better in many customer cases. So we expect that you all will have similar results as you roll that out at customer facilities. So just high level on simplicity, feature highlights there, not as in depth obviously as the iFIX here, but They have done a lot when it comes to redundancy, the configuration itself, the alarm attributes. You saw that earlier on this slide where we showed some of the implementations and updates that Simplicity has worked on in the last number of years. Python scripting support is also available within their software. They leverage the Proficy authentication, operations hub. So again, you'll see those themes throughout the entirety of the Proficy portfolio, where we really are treating it as one toolbox with just different tools in the same toolbox, right? So we're focusing our attention on interoperability and simplifying the experience there for our customers so that you guys can leverage more of what we do holistically. Screen signing, obviously OPC-UA, advanced reader, and EMRP support there as well too. So those are some major things. And finally, just to finish it off, to give you guys, if you're not already familiar with Configuration Hub, I know we've had a few conversations, but if you're just needing a little refresher, the central management is based off of Configuration Hub. It's not a separate product. It's just a tool within the Proficy portfolio. Again, it allows you to stretch across multiple sites, or even just obviously integrating and pulling in all the nodes of iFIX, your historian, your operations hub, simplicity, those kind of things that can all be brought in there as well as CSense and all the rest of the Proficy portfolio. Again, that single sign-on capability that we talked about there. We talked about the software central software license management. You can view and manage the licenses right in Configuration Hub. You have the capabilities around the model itself, leveraging that up as we continue to build out Data Hub. That will be replacing the current model functionality with the higher level as well too, for more holistic implementation. The visualization powered by Operations Hub, again unifying what used to be disparate information sources. We have in future releases, in the 2027 release, for instance. So thankful for Ben for that slide there earlier. But 2027 release will be doing a Proficy-wide capability where we have both SIMs and software being able to be updated directly from Configuration Hub. So you can see what's available on each of the nodes and update SIMs or update the actual entire software that's implemented on those, leveraging that Proficy installer and leveraging the central SIM capabilities. But yeah, project configuration deployment, the idea again is that through this, you can manage everything licenses wise, you can manage everything from the project, manage everything from the visualization, manage everything from the security, all within one area for the entire architecture. And leverage more of what we do from a Proficy perspective so that ultimately, again, you're poising your customers for greater success both now, today, and into the future. So with that, I wanted to go ahead and open this up for a time of Q&A. Thanks, Ben, for coming back on so that we can hopefully address some of these questions that have come through.
Sure, yeah, it was really great. Thanks, Alex. And yeah, glad we did that. The insight into the future roadmap is always good for people to know about. There was a couple of kind of simple questions that came up that I've actually answered. I don't know if people got some of the responses, but someone mentioned about Windows are actually extending some of their support, and that we did know that there is some enterprise editions where there'll be up to 3 years worth of additional support, but customers are going to be paying for that, obviously, and I'm sure that will ramp up significantly. The other one was about sharing the presentation, so we will share the video and access to that in an email. But what I'll work with on the team is I've posted that hopefully went to everyone. There is a link to a digital sales room that I've got created where I can upload the slides and some other content in there. And obviously there's the usual content that you can access in there as well. So move on to a few more complex questions, but this is one I'm sure, I don't know if actually we covered this. I don't know if you did actually, but can you name a specific version of iFIX below where the update is absolutely necessary due to Windows 10?
Yeah, so I would say it's hard to say where it's absolutely necessary. If the system is running today, well, as we mentioned there on the earlier slides, it'll continue to run on Windows 10. But if you want to be in a Windows 11 compliant version of iFIX, it's 2022 or above. 2022, 2023, and 2024 have Windows 11 support. All the versions prior to that do not. So, that is where you'll have to have that conversation with the customer. Maybe they're completely cut off from external, so maybe they can continue on in their, with their implementation. But we do recommend the update, obviously for, mitigating attack vectors, and then of course, taking advantage of some of the new features and functionality that we hope we laid out pretty well for you all.
Yeah, sure. And obviously we're just waiting. We'll see if a few more questions come in, but I do have let's pick one of the other ones that's there. I think you started talking before about this, but some feedback you've got from any clients where they've already transitioned to Windows 11 and upgraded the SCADA software.
Yeah, and I think the best feedback you can get is everything worked fine. So that's really the feedback we're getting with our customers who went ahead and upgraded their software and upgraded their OS behind the scenes, is that one, the tools that we implemented, the backup restore utility, the Proficy installer, helped them to get up to date a lot faster. We had specific customers who helped us with some of the picture open performance, etc. They went ahead and did their upgrades in the operating system at the same time as they were upgrading their software. And they not only did they say everything worked well, but they got the benefits that we were talking about. So that's really where we were focusing our attention, and where we have always focused our attention in the past, is that we try to maintain compatibility as a utmost guiding factor for everything that we do within the Proficy portfolio.
Okay, cool. Just wait to see if any more questions. I have a couple of questions left, but just while we do, in case anyone's thinking about it, just to again direct you to the pink survey icon. Please, give your feedback around the session, as well as something you might want to hear about in the future, so we can better serve your needs. And it's worth noting as well that on this topic, we do have, we are actively driving an upgrade program to make sure that customers get on supported versions, and obviously, our ambition is for you to do the same, because those very old versions potentially at risk, for security reasons, but also, as Alec mentioned before, that customers are seeing such outdated software. Maybe there's a risk that they will see something new and shiny as well, and they need to know that our software is also keeping up, and the future releases will be there. So there's a marketing campaign around this. As I said, I'll upload some stuff onto the digital page as well. There's a white paper out there that does this as well. So again, just asking everyone, feel free to reach out if you need any help on that. Let's have a look. If there's any new question. Well, what support and resources do we have to help? Just to go over that again quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have, the upgrade guys we talked about there. We have our documentation hosted both, in multiple areas, both our documentation specific website and also our support site. We have the upgrade documentation that walks you through the step-by-step process. Obviously, this is recorded as well too, so that this may be a benefit for future, endeavors there, again, as a refresher, or maybe to train another member of your team on how to walk things through. And our focus, and even what we've put together here, is just along the lines of thinking not only about upgrading the OS, but upgrading your customer's user experience as well too, right? So focusing our attention on how do you leverage available capabilities to position them well for today and also in the future.
Yeah, sure. And there is training available as well as part of the program, so you can go on Edge as well and find training on the software, which will give you some tips and how to do this. Just finally, we're getting close to the top of the hour. Are there ways to reduce the number of installations and upgrades customers would have to do as they go forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of to that point we talked about earlier, where you're looking at the architecture and saying, okay, is there a way that you can, for thick clients, maybe you move to thin clients where you're leveraging terminal server, and you have really one area to update. And then, of course, in terms of the upgrades themselves, leveraging the backup restore utility, leveraging the Proficy installer, getting onto the central management capability so that you can upgrade, not only parts or components of the project, but then, as we talked about here, coming in the 2027 release, Proficy wide will be, a central SIM update and even a central software update capability through configuration of the central management journeys. So those things all together will help you, help your customers ultimately stay up to date with all the newest capabilities and functionality, and of course, from a security perspective, when it comes to the things that we do here at GE Vernova.
Okay, perfect. So we're at the top of the hour now. So all that's left to do is just to say thanks to Alec for that insightful presentation. Thanks to everyone for joining, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks,
everybody.
Have a great
day. Bye.